Hey everyone, welcome back to the Hill Valley Subdivision. Not a huge update today, but I'm going to talk a little bit about how I installed some basic signaling on the railroad. Hey everyone, welcome back. When I initially designed this railroad and started building it, I never really thought about signaling. It was just something that I didn't think I'd need and didn't really want to mess with because it can get complicated. And so I just kind of avoided it, I guess you could say. But recently I stumbled across a series of videos from Jimmy over at the DIY and Digital Railroad, and I'll put links to those videos in the description for this video, that talked about how he did signaling with Arduino. And after watching a couple of the videos, it was something I wanted to try. And there's a spot on the railroad where it could have come in very handy. This line right here that comes up over the mountain pass is a single track main. There's no passing siding of any type there, so it's very difficult to do any type of meet or anything like that there, with the exception of this small siding at the very bottom of the pass, which is really only long enough for about a 9-car train to sit on the siding. So I decided that it would be worthwhile to have signals at the top and bottom of that mountain pass line, so that if an operator were waiting to enter that line, they would know if there was another train on the line or not. So after watching Jimmy's videos, I decided I was going to take a crack at this. So this video really isn't about the how-to of that. I'll link to Jimmy's videos for that, but just kind of how I implemented his design and his code on my railroad. So I followed his directions, used the same parts that Jimmy uses. So again, I'll link to his video on the how-to of that. But what I had to do is I had to cut a couple of gaps in the rail of this section of track to make it its own electrical block. So I cut a gap here just inside this tunnel to begin the block, and I cut a gap here at the other end down here by the fuel depot. And that created an electrical isolation for the most part. The other thing I had to do was I had to move all of the feeder wires from that rail in that section of track to a separate bus underneath the layout. So I did that and then ran that separate bus line through the BD20 current sensor in order to electrically isolate this section of track and accurately detect if a train was on that section of track. So really, if you follow his tutorial, you'll be able to make this work. And it's actually pretty easy. He even provides the code as a download for the Arduino, so you don't even have to write the code to make this work. So now with the signaling installed, let's take a look at the railroad and see how it works in action. So you can see here that the signal is currently green. There is not a train on that line up the mountain pass. So that means as this train approaches, it's okay to proceed and occupy the block. Now you'll see just as soon as the locomotive crosses the gap that I cut in the rail into that electrical section of the track, the detector detects the current drawn by the locomotive and triggers the signal. So the signal goes red both down here near the fuel depot and up at Coronet at the other end of the railroad. So now if an oncoming train needs to enter that block, the operator will see that there's a red signal and know that there's another train on that section of track and can wait until that train passes. So in the interest of time, we'll skip the journey over the mountain pass, and here is the train arriving at the other end of the block. You can see there's another train waiting to enter the block, so that operator just simply waits until that train passes, and once that train passes and the signal returns to green, then that operator is free to proceed and occupy that block. Again, you'll see just as soon as the locomotive enters the block, the signal turns to red. Now, one of the cool things about Jimmy's design is that they're designed to be daisy-chained together. That means that you can put another Arduino on the next block and the previous block on your railroad, and not only will they detect whether those blocks are occupied, they will communicate with each other. So the signals will change, say from a green to a yellow over green or a yellow over red, indicating that this block is free, but the next block is occupied, and so forth. Now, one caveat with that I discovered is that the last block in your chain, in this situation I only have the one block, the last block in your chain, you need to tie those input pins from those other sections to ground. Otherwise, they'll float and you'll get erroneous readings where sometimes it will trigger the signal to think the next block is occupied, when in all reality, there isn't another block. Another caveat with this design, or really any current sensing design, is unless you have some way for the cars to draw current off the track, this will only detect when a powered locomotive is on the rails, or say a powered lighted passenger car. Otherwise, it won't know that there's anything on the rails. So a way to fix that is to install resistor wheel sets on your cars. You can buy resistor wheel sets or you can make them, and I'm not going to reinvent the wheel with a tutorial on that. Jimmy's got a great tutorial on how to do that, so I'll link to that in the description as well. I plan to begin with just putting resistor wheel sets on the cabooses, because on this section of rail there should always be a caboose on the back end of that train. That way we'll be current sensing at the front of the train with the locomotive and at the end of the train with the caboose, so we should know for sure when that block is occupied. Well, that's signaling on the Hill Valley subdivision. A special thanks to Jimmy over at the DIY and Digital Railroad for putting this all together, designing this system and writing the code, and allowing us all to download the code for free. It's people like Jimmy that make this stuff easier for the rest of us. Well, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time here at the Hill Valley subdivision.